Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guys Mo Nawara in the Midwest. We've got Nate Weitzer on the East Coast, and we are looking at MVP odds in this video. Gentlemen, plenty to talk about here. Somewhat fun, more fun sometimes to talk about individual players and what we expect from them. A few, contextual things that we'll throw at you guys here in terms of some moves that have been made that will definitely be impacting how some of these players will be playing. I know in one of the first videos we made of this season so far, talking about some NBA futures, I mentioned Jason Tatum might be impacted heavily and positively by the arrival of Malcolm Brogdon there in Boston. So some opportunities for us to remind you guys of what those offseason moves have been as we talk about these players as well that we like. Some of the odds I'll just read off here real quick, guys, that we've got from DraftKings. Make sure you are shopping those odds as well, as there's plenty of other sites there that you can compare these odds to. We have our great odds finder tool on thelines.com for you guys to use. But those NBA MVP odds on DraftKings right now, guys, Luka is leading at plus 420. He is the favorite. Giannis plus 600, Embiid plus 650, Joker plus 900. Then you've got Ja Morant plus 1,500, and we'll just finish off this list with LeBron at plus 1,800 as well. So those are really the top guys there. I think there's a few dark horses we can mention as well, but Nate, kick us off here with what you're looking at and who your favorite pick would be right now.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to think about with MVP is the voter narratives and who's voting. And as we've become increasingly more advanced analytics based, you got to look at things like PER, VORP, whatever that is, all those things that Jokic just crushed in last year. And there was sort of the new school voting wave that pushed him over the top over Embiid, who, if you just looked at straight points per game or straight impact, maybe, and ignored those advanced analytics, those people voted for Embiid. But kind of lost in the shuffle is Giannis, who just, it's so hard to win a third straight MVP because of that voter fatigue. And I think that's why we're all steering away from Jokic winning a third straight here. And Giannis last year, while Jokic posted the best PER ever, Giannis tied the initial record set by Wilt Chamberlain in 61. He has the fourth best PER as well back when he won MVP 2 years prior. He actually scored more points per game this year, about 30. Career high free throw attempts. His free throw shooting continues to get better in the regular season, at least. So, I mean, you look at different odds here. I mean, he's plus 600 or 700 for MVP, but he also has the shortest odds to be first team all NBA, which tells you all you need to know there. I mean, fifth in Defensive Player of the Year odds. If you want a true two-way candidate, that makes him the strongest, safest bet. Same way we're talking about the Bucks being sort of the safest bet for the title is for Giannis to get back in that MVP race. I will throw out just a couple of my other intriguing bets. I know Luka is the favorite and is intriguing in his own right, but I don't know if the Mavs are going to be good enough to get that vote for him. But that being said, I am a little bit intrigued at LeBron. If you talk about narrative, if the Lakers are even able to swim and in the 4 to 6 range in the West, and LeBron does these things, passing Kareem, passing Magic, and the assist record, I think he might have a case by year's end. And Ja Morant, if he's able to stay healthy this year, I think the Grizzlies will be a monster per usual, and that he will take on all comers and continue to get better. But with Giannis, it is, the ability that if he can just add a couple things to his game every year, that's what's so scary about him. If he suddenly comes out and he's able to hit a jump shot consistently, because that's what he's been working on, then it's just a whole different level. And with Luka, all we're looking at is, he's maybe in better shape, maybe has a better mental attitude, but it's not like he can add things the way Giannis can, where all of a sudden he's just a completely different player who just could be even more efficient than he was before.
Well, I just really want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with most of what he's saying. I'm a little lukewarm on Ja. It's just pretty short odds, shorter than I'd like there. But I definitely. So the first name that popped into my mind when I'm looking over these, honestly, was the one you touched on earlier, Jason Tatum. But when I was initially looking at these, so we were, to peel back the curtain just a little bit, we were going to do this show last week, and then we ended up pushing it to this week. There was a plus 1,600 on the board for Tatum. That's gone now. plus 1,300 is the best price. Not quite as excited about that. But when you see the Celtics at the top of the futures board, I think you have to really heavily consider Tatum. I mean, if this team is going to be the best team and Jason Tatum, we know, is going to be their best player, plus anything over plus 1,000, I think isn't the worst. I mean, he did put up some pretty sick stats last year. He had like 27, 7, and 5. I mean, that's not obviously on the level of these top few guys, but it's still very good. And if the Celtics are like clear cut the best team, just dominating in the regular season, that's going to do a lot for his MVP case. The LeBron narrative is interesting. That makes sense. I honestly didn't consider LeBron too heavily, but what you're saying, it definitely makes sense about it could end up being kind of like, I guess if there's no like clear cut standout, they could turn it into, a little more career appreciation spot there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, plus 2,700, it's not the worst. It's definitely not. I agree with what you're saying about Luka. Man, if he does drag the Mavs to something with this roster, I mean, yeah, he's going to win, because I just don't see this as being a very good roster. I thought that last year, and they shocked me with how good they played. But it's a weaker roster this year, and so it's really going to be tough for him, I think. When I look lower down the board, the only name that really jumps out, just narrative-wise, is Donovan Mitchell. I know that I said I don't necessarily trust this team in the playoffs, relying on two small guards, but if the Cavs earn a top 3 seed, and it's very obvious in that case that the driver of their success is Donovan Mitchell, then 80-1 might be a little too long, but it's surprising, I guess, that this number didn't really move after he switched teams, because you would think his chances are much better. I mean, history just basically says you need to be on a top 3 seed in order to win MVP for the most part. So he had no chance of that basically in Utah, especially once Gobert was gone.
And I want to touch on that point real quick, which is like the sort of way that you can win MVP is either you're the best player on the best team. There's got to be a little bit more of that narrative, though, right? Like you, for instance, like before the last 4 were won back-to-back Jokic, then before that back-to-back Giannis. You're talking about no defense, nobody playing defense, winning MVP. You've got Harden, Westbrook, Curry. Curry was the best offensive player and just the best player, the engine, the everything that made the Warriors what they were. They were a little bit of a phenomenon in those 2 years, so that's why he got the MVP, I think, right? And he was a phenomenon as well at that time, and sort of this dude we had never seen before. He changed the game fine. Westbrook's team was a 6 seed, but he averaged a triple-double. Never seen that before. James Harden, those Rockets, I believe, in 2018 were like the 2 seed, right, what have you, around there. Best player on a team that was just unstoppable on offense, great. But then you've got just these 4 in a row where it's the best player in the league, period. There's nobody else that comes close. Some injuries happen to guys like KD that help that. Some guys take a step back. So really what I'm saying is the guys that fit the narrative of either best guy on the best team this year, that also is a little bit of an anomaly. I think John Morant fits that hugely. I think another step forward for him, maybe in the 3-point shooting, let's say, and his team being the 1 seed in the West. I think now you're talking about a case for Ja. If you're talking about best team similar to that, once again, now I think you're talking about potentially a guy like Embiid or Giannis as having the best record in the league and being the best player on that team. I think they could add to it. Obviously, Curry's in there. I don't know what it would take for Steph to win the MVP at this point, but I'm not sure that the narrative would be in his favor as much. But those are the situations where either there's nobody else on, and guys like Jokic are just dominating every one of these nerd stats, right, that we're talking about, VORP and Raptor and all these other things. Once they dominate those stats and there's nobody else that's the best player on the clear-cut best team, then you're talking about those guys. So in summation, I don't think there is going to be a clear-cut best team this year. I think there's a lot of parity across the league. I think it's very wide open and very fun to talk about from that standpoint. So as a result, now you're talking about, well, just who's the best player on a team that's 6 seed or better at this point, because that's what Joker won it with last year. Westbrook won it not that long ago on a 6 seed. It doesn't have to be the team that's going to really necessarily come out on top. It's just got to be the guy that you think can dominate all of those stats once again and still has somewhat of the narrative, right? So who fits that mold of everything I'm talking about here, Nate?
Yeah, and I mean, you got to think about who doesn't have another MVP candidate on their team, which is essential there if you're talking about not finishing top. Because I now that I think about it, yeah, if the Bucks aren't 1 or 2, I don't think there's any chance Giannis gets that because he's playing with two other guys who are almost indispensable for what the Bucks do. That kind of brings up Joel Embiid, though, where if he's able to stay healthy and the Sixers are in that top 3 in a much better East, then he looks like the clear MVP. Obviously, he moaned plenty about not being named last year, so there is some narrative there. But interesting when you go through the winners, too, nobody playing defense. But now, the NBA nerds, the writers, same thing at this point, are shamed if they're not paying attention to that side of the floor. So, you're never going to see a Trae Young or a James Harden win MVP again, I guess. Maybe if Embiid went down and Harden suddenly was a terror. But, I mean, the impact that these guys can have on both ends of the floor, Giannis, Embiid, LeBron, if he plays full season, that I think that's what can put them over the top when you do look at the entire body of work and how they're impacting things. So it really is, if you're saying like we're projecting that there's going to be some great parity here, it's who's really going to have an impact in an all-around sense to lift the play of their teammates and really be able to carry them to one of those higher seeds, not necessarily the top seed.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And I would say that brings us to a couple other guys that we haven't really gone too far into. I know you mentioned Tatum. I'm there with that at plus 1,200. It's actually plus 13 on FanDuel. I want to ask you, Mo, I know we were talking about small guards and you not liking them, but you just threw Donovan Mitchell out there. What do you think about Trae Young? Plus 4,000 at FanDuel. If the Hawks come out and are, once again, to Nate's point, they don't have to be a top 1 or 2 seed. I think if they're a top 3 or 4 seed with Trae Young carrying them on offense the way that I think he can continue to do, not even having to worry about the defensive end with DeJounte handling things for whoever the best guard on the other team is. What do you think about plus 4,000 on FanDuel right now for Trae?
I think it's going to be tough just because I do see them as kind of a middle tier at best team in the East. So I think he'd have to clearly outperform the top guys, which is going to be really tough. There's another guy in that range that actually, I was wondering about Devin Booker at 40-1. He's down closer to 20-1 at a couple of the books. There's a 40-1 available at FanDuel. I mean, you kind of touched on how Chris Paul, we know he's declining. We would have to expect at this point Devin Booker to basically take a bigger role in driving whatever happens to the Suns, and they have been an amazing regular season team the last couple of years. I'm personally not a big fan of Booker, but I do think 40-1 might be a little long if he can drive them to another top 3 seed, basically. When we do expect Chris Paul to have a lower level of production. I mean, it's definitely time, put up or shut up for Devin Booker. You got to either step up and be a top tier superstar or just accept that Luka's your daddy and quit talking shit to him.
Yeah, we'll relay the message on that one to Book. But yeah, I would say Luka continues to be his daddy is a fair way to put it. Let me just ask you about a couple more guys here, fellas. That I do want to go right back to you, Mo, because we haven't mentioned Kawhi Leonard yet. Plus 3,000 on DraftKings right now. Seems pretty good if you're feeling as confident as you were in that futures video about the Clips, especially if you think they're going to be atop the West. You'd have to feel good about Kawhi being such a huge reason, or are you worried about Paul George taking some of those votes from him?
I think if you bet Kawhi Leonard for MVP, you should just donate me your money. I'll send it to a charity. Zero shot Kawhi Leonard wins MVP. I just know that he's not going to take the regular season serious. He's going to take 20 games off. No shot he wins MVP. I mean, I actually think... But I think everyone knows that. I don't think you can wait and see if the Clips lose some games and then get a better price on the Clips. I don't know if that's going to be... I think everyone knows they're not going to take the regular season serious. This is a team that I just expect playoff success from, but I don't know what they're going to do in the regular season. It would not surprise me if they were outside the top 4 seeds in the West.
Fair. No, I think that's all fair.
Yeah, I mean, agree. You got to play 60 games to have a shot to even qualify for the MVP. And I don't think that Kawhi is a lock to play 60. There was a year where he didn't get all first team defense votes because he didn't play 60 games. So I think we can expect that. I think we do have to touch on Kevin Durant to an extent, who, you talk about narratives from the way the playoffs ended last season and him not being included in the conversation of best player in the world. And then, of course, requesting the trade. He could come out and just reassert that narrative. If Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving are just, aloof half the season, then he doesn't have that necessarily guys stealing votes from him. I don't think Kyrie Irving has any chance of getting MVP votes. So if the Nets are suddenly a contender again, those KD tickets might look pretty good. But yeah, I didn't ever respond to what you guys are saying about Tatum. I think there is a real strong case there in terms of being a great regular season player. He's quickly coming into concern in terms of how he might handle a playoff series if somebody adjusts the way the Warriors did defensively on him. But I think he could have another outstanding regular season, and I'm fine with that at plus 1,200.
Yeah, no, right now, to be very clear for me, I'm eyeing Tatum. I'm eyeing Trey because I love plus 4,000. That's why I even asked Mo about it. And I would consider, I know you said Giannis at 1, and the Bucks need to be a 1 or 2 seed, probably even a 1 seed to have him be considered for another MVP third, right, in 5 years. But at the same time, I'm not worried about that. I do think the Bucks, if all goes according to plan and everything was just in a vacuum, nobody gets hurt, I think the Bucks would be the number 1 seed in the East, which would lead to that. But the last guy I wanted to ask you about, Nate, that you brought up too briefly, to us at least, plus 7,000 for our guy James Harden. It's not the craziest thing in the world. Do you actually consider that you sprinkling a few units on, or am I just talking too much on camera about stuff you wanted to keep off camera?
No, I mean, like I said, I want to bet on the Harden bounce back in some way. I think MVP might be going too far. I think it would require an injury to Embiid and then the Sixers to still be a top 3 team because Harden reverts back to his old form. But it's hard for me to talk out of one side of my mouth and say Trae Young has no shot because of his defense, and then to say, well, James Harden's going to win MVP. But the odds are longer. It is intriguing that he could get back to maybe all NBA form. I think he's getting plus 900 or 1,000 to make one of the all NBA teams. That might be worth a shake. I just do think he's going to come back much stronger this year, and that's a good way to bet on the Sixers early in the season or look at their win total.
Yeah, no, I'm with it. I want to make one last point too, which is I like waiting. I mean, because we're relying on the nerds, because we know that there's going to be a narrative that is not only written about by these nerds who are the NBA writers, not to be fair, such as yourselves, who are writing about these things, and covering these things as well. Because we need to rely on what their narrative is, they're going to write what their narrative is, and then we're going to know what it is because we're just going to compile it and go, it does seem to be very clear that the writers are saying they like Jokic, they like Giannis. And that's been the case the last 4 years. Is the narrative to me is pretty clear by like January or February, where you can still get some pretty good numbers on all of these players. Some guys will drop out. Odds will definitely decrease for some guys that we like right now. But some of them might stay pretty steady if everybody's playing up to snuff, all the way through, all the way up to about January, February. Like I said, it's a little bit fish here and there to really, wait too long. But at the same time, plus 600 on a bet that I'm feeling really good about because the people making the picks are writing about what they like, and I can follow that and figure it out to a degree. I think that does help your odds there. But Mo, any parting words from you or any sort of response to what I'm talking about here?
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, that's kind of part of the reason I was hammering Jokic all season last year. It was very obvious that there was going to be a very, very strong advanced stats case for him. So I think that drives a lot of the voting for sure nowadays. That's kind of why I lean more toward Devin Booker than Trae Young when I'm looking at these mid-tier guys, because that the stats are never going to really support Trae because he's such a massive minus on defense. I mean, he has to do that's. I really think the Hawks would need like number 1 seed or something for this to happen, just because he's been identified by the advanced stats as literally like the worst defender in the league the last few years, where Devin Booker is like a marginal plus, I think, on defense.
Yeah, that's a super fair point because as we were saying, as we're going through who won before Giannis and Jokic for the last 4 years, it was it was three guys over 4 years, Curry winning back-to-back, Westbrook and Harden. All those guys are pure offense. I think there was a bit of a clear stand taken by these writers essentially to go, wait a second, we're just handing it to Russell Westbrook because his team, because he averaged a triple-double. Like, he did it again. If you just forego defense and forego, trying to win for padding stats, then great. Then you're just going to keep doing what you got to do. James Harden in 2018 also, that's when they changed the rules right after that, because that season specifically going to the line like 13 times a game. So I think there is some of the, make the voting process fair again and make it about defense a little bit, sort of a stand that's been taken. And I think that helps us with our predictability and who's going to win, to Mo's point there about Jokic. So that is all the time that we have for you guys in this one. I've had a blast with you guys talking about MVP. We also have that other video up for you guys in terms of our futures odds there for who's going to be champion. We're going to be continuing a bunch of these futures, hopefully for you guys, with some division odds and other things of that nature, up until we do get that regular season start here in the middle of October. And then it's going to be every single weekday with multiple videos and those NBA player props for you guys. So make sure to like and subscribe. And until we see you next, happy betting.